Right now on Tech Radio, the year that was and the year that's coming.
Hi, I'm Artemis. I am a computer-generated AI voice, and you're listening to Tech Radio.
Every week online and on air with RTE Radio, we bring you the latest in tech from Ireland and across the world. You're welcome to episode 1097. This week, looking back at the top stories of 2025 and critically looking ahead at 2026. I'm Dusty Rose. Joining us as always is our editor-in-chief, Niall Kitson. How you doing, Niall?
Hey, how's it going?
Also joining us is our tech journalist and voice of reason, I like to call him, Jason Walsh. How are you?
I'm well, Dusty. Thanks for having me on.
Excellent. Let's get to it.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
Guys, just before we start, I want to give a big nod of respect, as Tony Fenton used to say, to RTE, because for many years, Tech Radio has been a feature of their digital radio service, RTE Radio One Extra. But sadly, from December 31st, 2025, all will fall quiet as RTE close their digital radio services. So, I think that's a shame, but I want to thank Erik and all of the team running RT's digital radio services for believing in our show and bringing it to new audiences across the country. You will be missed. But that, of course, leads me on to our opening story looking back at the year 2025, which includes the launch of digital DAB radio by the commercial sector and the closure of the digital radio sector by our public broadcaster, RTE. Can I be a complete bitch and say commercial radio is coming to this 10 years too late? Or do either of you care? Are you like young people? It's like, radio, who cares? People only listen to podcasts.
I care an enormous amount.
Oh, go on. Why?
Because I grew up with radio, both the peripheral stations, one of which you used to work for, Dusty, on Atlantic 252 and Radio Luxembourg and all those days. And then I graduated. Once Ireland got its own independent radio, I started listening to that. I listened to the Pirates. I listened to shortwave stuff. I love radio, and I had great hope for both DAB and its competitor, its AM competitor, Digital Radio Mondial, which is completely failed, but was fascinating technology. DAB has been a success in the UK just through the BBC, just the government of the 2000s just threw so much money at it, really. In other countries, it's been a bit of a mixed picture, and unfortunately, Ireland is one of the ones where it hasn't succeeded. And I genuinely love live on-air radio. Podcasts are lovely. We all love them. But there's just something very special about radio. And I think that abandoning, I can understand why RTE is doing so. It's had a lot of trouble in the last 2 years, just financially and other things. But I do think we should mark it as sad. I don't know why the commercial stations are coming back in now. If they'd been there 10 years ago, it might have helped a bit. And, the last thing I would say is there is a kind of wider problem in the industry. I'm was an absolute sucker for the kind of speech programming that used to be on BBC Radio 3, but that's all been cancelled now. It's effectively being turned into Classic FM. So although speech programming is surviving in podcasts, I'm worried that radio is just not the force it used to be, and that I think that's a real cultural loss.
I think, and that is just because it has changed over the decades in that, when I was growing up, radio was where you got music, and that has completely changed now because you get it from YouTube or Spotify or Apple Music or whatever happens to be. So that kind of element of radio, it's lost, though it's still very important because, as I always say, like even with Spotify and how easy it is to put a playlist together, we as human beings are too damn lazy to even put our own playlist together of our own favourite songs. We either use what's automatically suggested by Spotify or listen to the radio. However, I won't harp on about this too long. The reason I was saying that it's 10 years too late is because where DAB has been very successful in the UK, Australia and other markets, it's where the regulator, the public broadcaster and the commercial broadcasters have all come together and said, right, this is a great idea. By offering people more choice of radio stations, more people listen to radio and they listen for longer. This is what they have found. In Ireland, you've got all these little fiefdoms. And when ourselves and RTE were trying to launch DAB back in, 2005? Might have been around 2010. I can't remember. It's a long time ago.
I remember the trials were going on around then, and you were
Well, we were up to our eyeballs and all of those. It's quite fun meeting the Minister of the Department of Communications once a month and giving him updates and all that kind of lark. But the commercial stations were not coming on board. And now we have a situation where RTE, because they need to save money, had to make a decision and digital radio got canned. And now the commercial stations are coming along going, actually, do you know what? It's kind of like...
Well, here's the thing. I mean, could the pirate stations have gone direct to DAB without having to worry about the level of, regulation that they would have to deal with? Because I remember in the early noughties, there was kind of a night of the long knives where there were raids on numerous pirate radio stations at the same time. So you had stations like Jazz FM, you had, I think, what was it called at the time? XFM. Were all raided. All these little niche stations that, I kind of grew up listening to. And that was kind of it. There was sort of a 6-month lull, and then everybody sort of got their antennas back together up on Three Rock.
True. The thing about pirate radio today, or a lot of them, is they're kind of like passion projects, if you want to put it that way. Whereas the regulation, and especially regulation if you want to broadcast in DAB, is a lot lighter now, but you still need a certain level of professionalism, and you can't do that when you're doing a hobby radio station. But a lot of people now just run a hobby radio station online anyway.
Yeah.
Anyways.
But I do think there's a fundamental kind of internet problem at work here, which is, the Chris Anderson thesis of the long tail, that everything would be available forever. That has kind of turned out not to be true. And a lot of the kind of, middlebrow, and I'm specifically talking about speech radio here because the licensing with online is quite different from music. But we're not getting the really high end stuff that you would think would persist in some podcasts somewhere. We're getting kind of endless talking head panel shows about history and politics that could be on any radio station.
Yeah, you mean just like this one, yeah?
Well, we're not claiming to bring you Harold Pinter. I'm just worried that today's Harold Pinter will never be discovered. There's definitely a place for talking heads.
There's always a place for talking heads. David Byrne, we love you. Right, listen, we are breaking our show into a list of 10 things that we have noted 2025 for, and then we'll take a quick look at what we're expecting from 2026, and we'll also nominate our Person of the Year. If Time Magazine can do it, why can't we? Let's kick off with Niall. Number one, what was one of your big stories of 2025?
One of my big stories of the year of massive outages. It was fascinating to see how little it takes for the internet to come to a grinding halt and for essential services just to vanish. We had at the start of the year Marks and Spencer's, and it's sort of retailer gets hit with massive cyber attack, almost par for the course. They had, the official narrative will always be they had poor cybersecurity practices in place. Somebody in the back office clicked on a link they shouldn't have, or, somebody was sitting inside the network for years. There are lots of explanations to why this kind of attack can happen. They were offline. I think their ordering system was offline for 6 months. I think it was June by the time it got back working properly. And that's only one example. Jaguar Land Rover got hit quite badly as well. One that I would like to draw particular attention to, and Dusty, you were paying attention to this one as well, was Collins Aerospace. Its outage affected airports in Brussels, Berlin and Heathrow, two of the busiest airports in Europe. What do Collins do? It's like is it ticketing or is it baggage? It's one of the essential services.
It's backroom stuff anyway for the airlines. So it was only certain airlines that were affected, not the actual airport.
Yeah, and that was they were able to roll out a patch within a couple of days, but a couple of days is a long time in security. So that I think they ended up having to roll back to a previous version or something like that. I can't remember if it was an update that brought everything to a halt.
But that's a really interesting thing that you say, in that it's always something small. It's like it's an update, and quite often those updates are automated.
Yeah,
and it's like the Cloudflare one in November. That was just a database update.
That was another one. Well, I mean, the other sort of two huge ones, because they occupy such a huge part of the basic infrastructure of the internet, which is Cloudflare and AWS. I mean, for AWS to suffer an outage, I mean, basically, all the big hitters on the internet just vanished for as long as the service was down. I mean, if you could, effectively kick one of the legs out from under a table, that's what happened. I mean, it's such a small market, and it just showed how few companies are actually holding the entire internet up. And the fact that there is no meaningful competition for AWS out there is kind of terrifying. And, on paper, it's like, okay, they achieved market dominance. They identified a gap in the market. People gravitated towards it. It just became a default part of everybody's tech stack. And then all of a sudden, an error occurs, and people are suddenly aware that there's vulnerabilities there. And it could be something as simple as a software update. It doesn't have to be a major cyber attack for something to happen. Errors are human as well as technical. And I think that was a huge learning for the year as well. I think there should be an awful lot of people shopping around for an AWS alternative in 26.
Yeah. Listen, Jason, let's move on to you and one of your stories from 2025. And you're going way back to the start of the year.
Yeah, it's just shows you what a tumultuous year it's been, that we've already forgotten this. Certainly I had, until I went back through all the things I'd written about. The DeepSeek shock in January, if you can cast your mind back that far, when at that point all of the AI companies in America had been demanding basically government handouts, huge investment from private sector as well, talking about consuming all the chips, all the NVIDIA chips that were going to cost a fortune. Everything was a nightmare. It was consuming electricity. And the Chinese come along with their DeepSeek R1 AI model, and it is able to do what OpenAI could do at a fraction of the cost, using far less compute, simpler chips, and it caused NVIDIA to lose 600 billion in market value in a single day, which it clearly quickly recovered, but it was just interesting in its own right, because the whole US AI play had been super high-end, extremely expensive chips in extremely expensive data centers, and here comes a competitor saying, no, we're not going to do it. And then they release it under an MIT license, which is a kind of interesting open source license that allows you to fork and branch and even close. So yeah, I thought that was an inevitable kind of geopolitical response to America's very clear dominance up to now in AI.
Have you been keeping an eye on DeepSeek throughout the year? Because yes, it came in and it was good as the other AIs that we had been using, and it was way cheaper, but it doesn't seem to have taken off. No, from my point of view.
I think there is a geopolitical dimension to that as well. We're still obviously much more comfortable. We don't like sharing our data with Microsoft and OpenAI and Google, frankly, very much, but we prefer sharing it with them than with some Chinese company. And I think that really does have to be taken into account. You'll probably see the Chinese companies make great strides, first of all, in their own domestic market, which of course is enormous, and then in Southeast Asia, in East Asia, and then perhaps in kind of states that it is now doing more and more deals with, whether that's Africa or Brazil or Argentina or whatever.
And then it'll eventually seep into the Western world, in Europe and Canada and North America and stuff.
Well, it's definitely a threat, and the Europeans are definitely, we're absolutely on the back foot in technology in general, not just in AI.
I think what's interesting with DeepSeek is the fact that it came from a market that can be completely self-sustaining. I mean, China doesn't need OpenAI. It doesn't need Perplexity or anything else. It can rely completely on DeepSeek. And, when you've got a market that can effectively ignore the West, I mean, the only way for, the only thing it can do is grow. And when you've got an open source license like that, it just becomes a laboratory. It just becomes an item of curiosity, an alternative for people to work away with at home with. And I've seen examples of people using their own training data, their own data sets. Quite recently, I saw somebody using a data set that was based on Victorian English. So you wouldn't get a lot of you wouldn't get contemporaneous information. But if you were to okay, write a letter for me, you would get a very distinct voice back from it. Of course, a very dated one, but that's kind of the point. So DeepSeek, I think it will seep into Europe and it will seep into the US, even if it is as a curiosity at the moment, because there is still that little bit of paranoia about it's a Chinese product. It's just going to be another surveillance device for the Chinese state.
I think you've got that, and then for the common man in the street, if you like, it came along too late. There's another European one. Is it Mistral or
Mistral?
The French one, right? That's not being used. I mean, it's available in English and it's terrific at doing several different languages because it's European. It's kind of, that's its default. But that hasn't taken off either.
Well, I mean, yeah. And I mean, Europe, as I said, has lagged in technology. It would be interesting. I've toyed around with it and it is quite a good model. What's interesting though, between all the different models is I'm not finding that the difference is the technology. I'm finding the difference is the tone and the way they're set up. I've asked the same question to Claude, Copilot, Gemini, and other things. And Claude gives me a thoughtful and at least apparently, so this was a question about literary fiction, and it agreed with my proposition, pushed back on parts of it, and gave me a complicated, sophisticated answer. Whereas Copilot and Gemini started telling me that I should read romantasy and cli-fi books. Now, that is not a hallucination. That is dissembling based on a data set that is being oriented toward being positive and productivity based. It was bullet pointing and PowerPointing a serious question about culture. And that is not a technological problem. That's a choice.
Do you find a difference between the AIs now?
I do, because they're all designed to do specific things. I mean, Gemini and Copilot are not designed for discussions. They're just, how do I do this? Or do this, create a script to automate this function or whatever. That's what they're there for. They're productivity tools. People are using OpenAI or ChatGPT for things that it was never intended for. I mean, you remember during the year, there was an update to 4.0 and people were absolutely distraught because the tone of voice had changed, because OpenAI went, oh, actually people are using ChatGPT as a therapist or as a friend, and this isn't what we wanted at all. So they changed the voice to something much more formal and people got very upset over it. So they had to roll back. And that's illustrative of what people expect. Well, and if you're honoring people's expectations, well, that's fine. I've had discussions, inverted commas, with Claude and found it indeed to be readable and insightful, but still erring on the positive, which is one of the major issues we have with LLMs at the moment, that they just won't tell you if you're wrong. They will point you in the right direction pretty much. But I think Jason's example of, dealing with other models and being directed towards lowest common denominator stuff, I think that's something people should be very aware of. And I've come across the idea of AI literacy quite a lot in the last few years, and that's going to become essential, because it will be, okay, if you want to have this kind of conversation, don't do it with Gemini, don't do it with Copilot, go over to Claude if that's what you want to know. It's like asking different people for expertise. Sorry, Dusty, I'm not going to ask you for investment advice. I'm going to find somebody whose job it is to provide investment advice. And I think maybe that's the way we should be looking at AI and LLMs.
The one thing that annoys me about AI is I would use the Gemini with Google quite a bit. And almost every time it's like kind of, oh, that's a great idea. What a good question. Oh, that's so insightful. It's kind of this, kind of a flattery that it's giving me. And just every time, go away. Just give me the facts.
But again, would you not think that's a cultural issue? Do you remember when LLM's image making capabilities first burst onto the scene, and there were all these AI selfies of ancient tribes, and they all had big American 100,000 watt smiles?
Yeah.
All their own teeth.
Yeah, indeed. Listen, I think we still have a long way to go, but I love that little phrase, like kind of the AI we have today is the worst it's ever going to be. It's just getting better and better by leaps and bounds, which brings me on to my big story of 2025. And I know Niall was ribbing me about this during the week because I think this time last year I was saying 2025 is going to be the year of agentic AI. AIs that can go out and do things and accomplish tasks for you. And, well, it kind of hasn't really. Is that what you're trying to get at, Niall?
It hasn't. When it comes to customer facing issues. And we had this discussion a couple of weeks ago. It is not working. People can identify and do not trust agentic AI. In the way that, people were annoyed over chat boxes on websites. You would wonder, is this an actual person? And it's almost like, you can tell your query is being elevated to a human at some point if what you want to know doesn't sort of fit into the FAQ. So agentic AI, I think, works within organizations where expectations are set. And I know people that are using multiple agentic AIs to sort out things amongst themselves, which I think is fascinating and very, very dangerous because errors compound, as we know. So if you're not doing customer-facing work, agentic AI can be useful. However, as a customer service tool, it has not worked so far, just because people are still able to tell the difference between a human and an AI service agent.
I hate to disagree with you, but I may. You're right about agentic AI. It's not what it was promised, but things have started to get out there in the world where we're getting a taste of agentic AI. Like, Perplexity launched their Comet browser. It has an AI in it that is allegedly supposed to go off and be able to do things for you, like book a restaurant or all that kind of stuff. It kind of does it. It's not great. It will get better. We've seen live audio translation, which is a wee bit better. So if you're off on your holidays in Spain or something like that and somebody speaks to you in Spanish, your earphones, you can actually hear the words that are being said. A little bit of a delay, but that's quite good. A thing we were talking about a couple of weeks ago is Bot Bureau, which is an Irish thing. And that's a phone answering thing for electricians or plumbers or whatever use you want. But essentially, as soon as the phone is answered, it goes, "Hi, I am an AI, but I can answer any question you want and I can sort stuff out." And what impressed me with that was that it can go, "Well, do you want to make an appointment, or do you want me to send an email? Do you want me to get somebody to call you back?" That kind of stuff, and it's able to go and do those things. And then Make, of course, Make.com, they're incorporating AI into their systems. And that's really interesting because before you had to identify every stage. And now it's kind of getting more into if this happens, then you need to go off and make a decision along those lines. So I think it's been, while it hasn't been a year of agentic AI, it has been a year where we've seen the start of agentic AI, and I think it'll only improve next year. Next story, Niall, you want to talk about the tech bros. Again, going back to January when they all got together in Washington.
All the way back to January. And as soon as I saw this picture, I was like, this is the defining image of the next 4 years. This is what American politics is now. It was the Trump inauguration, and it was that picture of Mark Zuckerberg, Sundar Pichai, Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk all in a row, all delighted to be there. In the background, in some shots, there's Tim Apple. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, that's it. The jig is up for tech as an honest broker. Everybody is all in now with Trump, even if it's purely for business reasons. And it is. We've seen a couple of very sad developments during the year, because one thing that, Trump 2.0 is all about is it's naked transactionalism. It is corrupt by design. Trump has passed his big, beautiful bill. He does not care about what happens for the next 3 years. It's just he sorted out his tax break for the billionaires, and really, he doesn't care about his base anymore. He's not up for re-election. He can do whatever he wants. If he wants to go on a revenge tour and put together shoddy indictments against his political foes, he can do it. He can engage in lawfare all he likes. And what was the payoff? Well, here we go. First of all, not only did the tech bros debase themselves by letting themselves be photographed out in the open, they have, in tandem, contributed $300 million to the effort to redevelop the White House ballroom. Now, when I say redevelop, this thing has been demolished a big chunk of the White House was being knocked down and is being rebuilt in Trump's image. So of those donors, Microsoft, Coinbase, Palantir, Lockheed Martin, Amazon, Google, they're all in. They're footing the bill for this. I've seen some of the cutlery. Even the cutlery is branded. It's like, this fork brought to you by Amazon kind of thing. And of course, during the year, we've had Trump with his ridiculous meme coins that a lot of his MAGA base actually bought into. Of course, it was a pump and dump scam, and regular people have lost an awful lot of money on them, thinking that, this would be a currency that, because Trump's name on it, would actually be used in public. Of course, it was not. It's just sort of languishing there. I think it lost like 95% of its value overall. I think it lost 65% of its value within a week of release, if not within a few days. It's just, the whole thing has been a grift. So you wonder, okay, what's the payoff? And just this month, December, we're starting to see what the payoff is. Now, one of the things that you mentioned, you might have mentioned, Trump rescinded Biden's executive order on AI regulation. Trump has written one, which has just come into effect. And in theory, it's about creating a baseline standard for regulating AI. However, that baseline is so low that it is actually going in direct competition or direct conflict with state efforts to regulate AI. And one of the reasons why states are looking to adopt a harder line on AI is down to the cost of utilities. It's the cost of compute, which directly relates to the cost of electricity. It's bringing up the cost of electricity because it's increasing demand. You have a Democratic Party who have adopted the issue of affordability and the cost of living as their platform for the next few years. Hopefully, they'll actually make hay from it. Of course, they're looking for shorter term gains in the midterms, which are coming up in 2026. And it's all about cost of living. It's all about making utilities cheaper. And yet here we have an executive order blocking regulation of the biggest consumer of electricity in the States. So it's going to make regulation much tougher. It's going to make bringing down the cost of utilities much tougher. And this is the play. Big tech wanted less regulation on AI, partly, because they want to do what they want to do. One of the barriers was regulation at state level. Now you're going to have regulation at federal level. And it's just designed to gudge up the system, because executive orders don't last forever. It's just there to gudge up the system for as long as Trump is in office. And maybe some things will carry along in the next administration, depending on who gets voted in. So that for that reason, big tech bending the knee is one of my big stories of 26.
All right. Now, you were talking about Trump, and going back again to the earlier start of the year, it's another story for Jason. We're almost halfway through our list. Jason, you couldn't say the word Trump on the first quarter of 2025 without also mentioning Mr. Musk.
Yeah. Mr. Musk, the man of the year, arguably. Do you want me to talk about him specifically, or get into the sort of wider Stargate thing that he was...
The Stargate thing is what I had in mind, yeah.
Yeah. Well, just after his inauguration, Trump announced this Stargate thing. And if I can just bracket that for a second, I'm seriously sick of TV programs and science fiction nerd culture being reference points in the world of IT and computing. But anyway, $500 billion in AI infrastructure pumped into the likes of OpenAI and so on. But what's really important here, I think, is to note the entanglement of big tech and government, which is exactly what Niall was speaking about just a second ago. I would like to say that it's actually nothing new. If you look back at Hewlett-Packard and you look back at the big Shockley Semiconductors and Fairchild and all of those companies way back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, the computing industry grew out of the military. I mean, that's not even a criticism. It's just a reality that, we should be aware of. So, it has always, despite its kind of ideology around free markets, always actually been dependent on big government handouts in one form or another. But what was really interesting here was this inauguration of Trump seemed to indicate that these guys, as Niall said, have completely flipped side. In the case of perhaps Palantir and Elon, they've genuinely sort of outed themselves as being politically on Team Trump. The other ones probably just doing it for money and influence and in order to keep the cash flowing. But what's really interesting about that isn't the cynicism. It is cynical. But what's interesting is, from my entire life, literally every moment I have been alive, politicians have been refusing to take decisions and saying we can't do this because the markets will object, particularly the bond markets, but also the stock markets. Always, no, we need the market. The market rules. Politicians only have a limited impact. Trump, if you take away my personal distaste for him, has kind of blown that argument up. We're finally admitting that politics actually has primacy over economics, which is a really strange thing to get from a Republican president. And it's a really strange thing to get from the tech industry, because they have both typically been on the side of markets. So I just think it's worth bearing that in mind, that we now have a signal being sent out that actually politics has its own agency.
That's a really interesting point. Tell me about Stargate, because you get really annoyed with the naming of Stargate.
Oh, look, I'm very tired of lowbrow or middlebrow science fiction and fantasy culture's absolute rise into the mainstream. I'm sick of 3-hour-long superhero movies. I'm sick of just people's cultural by the way, I have nothing against these programs or films. They're perfectly fun. I'm just saying they shouldn't be the only thing that is like the anchor point of our culture. And it just seems to me very strange that we've declined to the point where people aren't reading serious, experimental literary fiction anymore. Literary fiction has become kind of middlebrow and confessional, MFA-led. Science fiction and fantasy are in decline, even though their sales are shooting through the roof. Everything's just becoming a big middlebrow mulch, and that really bothers me.
Right, fair enough. Number 6 on our list of the top 10 of the year is from myself. And just a note more than a story, a lot of tech layoffs. Because last year, as in 2024, one of the phrases being touted, and we've said it many times, Niall and myself on the show, that, kind of AI is not going to take your job, but somebody using AI will take your job. Whereas in 2025, I think it is a case of, no, actually AI is taking your job. Intel let nearly 25,000 people go worldwide. Microsoft announced 15,000 jobs gone during the year. Globally, again, there's been reductions at Salesforce, HP, even AWS. I think a lot of it is economic uncertainty this year, because as Jason was saying, Trump kind of throwing his weight around and affecting the markets, and everybody's uncertain money-wise this year. But I think a lot of it is actually AI is taking jobs.
What I think is interesting about that observation is not just that it's the number of jobs going, but it's the nature of the jobs that are going. Professions that we thought were bulletproof are actually being downsized as well. So you have engineers losing their jobs. You have cybersecurity professionals losing their jobs. It's not to say that the jobs market isn't buoyant and there are loads of startups looking for talent, loads of smaller companies looking for talent. But if you want to go to work for one of what they're still called the chocolate factories, if you want to work in Microsoft, Google, Salesforce, it's not as easy to get in. Easy. I mean, these are, very prestigious companies to work for, but, the demand for talent is actually going down. So, it has completely given lie to that statement that somebody using AI will take your job, because AI rollout is very, very slow in organizations. However, the ones that have embraced it are downsizing and they're not replacing talent.
I think it is slow, but when you're looking at big corporations, they are slow, but when they move. Do you know what I mean? I always found that strange when I was working in RTE, because we were way behind always with computers and even operating systems. We were still on Windows 3.11 when the rest of the world was on Windows 95. And I remember giving out to somebody in IT at the time, and they're kind of, well, the problem is that when we change, something, we have to change 3,000 units. I was like, okay. You're not going to do that. It's grand for you and me. Oh, I got a new laptop. Do you know what I mean? But when you've got to buy 3,000 laptops, you've kind of considered that decision. But anyway, the point I was going to make about the tech layoffs is I'm just recognizing the fact that jobs are being lost. Jobs are being lost because of AI, but people are all doom and gloom and this is the end of the world. And I keep saying this, in 2-3 years' time, there's going to be a massive glut of unemployment. Nobody's going to have a job anymore. AI is going to do everything. I think it's all balderdash. I think what we're seeing here is an industrial revolution, something like the Industrial Revolution when the steam engine came in, or more recently when the internet came in. Because everybody was kind of going, the internet's going to change everything. It's going to take all the jobs. It didn't. Things just change. AI is going to change working patterns, if you like.
I mean, history is on your side. I mean, things tend not to pan out in either the extreme positive or negative cases. But sometimes they do. I mean, is there no argument of where Yanis Varoufakis' argument of neo-feudalization? These big tech companies are sort of becoming the platforms. We're moving away from democratic capitalism with participation in the market, ordinary people buying things. More and more goods are aimed at ultra rich. We're seeing a huge growth in private jets and all of this kind of stuff.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think, when it comes to buying, the most luxurious of things out there, the watch of which there is only one ever built, the private jets, all that sort of thing. A lot of it comes down to so much money is being made that people are forgetting what it feels like to buy something expensive. So if you have if you have more money than Croesus, nothing is going to feel expensive. Nothing is going to feel like, I actually had to work hard to make something like that. And you see it in the art market as well. I mean, there are tremendously overvalued pieces of art out there. And so much of it comes down to the prestige of actually owning, a Picasso or something like that, because there are so few of them. But also, it's that feeling of having spent big money that, we have it. We have to save up to, buy a car or something like that, or we have to take out a loan to buy a car, and it feels quite demanding. We all have to take out mortgages, and it feels quite demanding. And when you've actually paid it off, it's like, oh, right, that burden is out of my life. That's fantastic. The ultra wealthy have that feeling for buying grossly inflated items.
Because I love Michael O'Leary's quote where he said, once you're getting paid more than 50 million a year, he says, the numbers are irrelevant. He said, it's a matter of keeping score. And it's like you say, when you're buying things like that, they're buying it so that somebody else doesn't have it and the price is irrelevant. Anyway, we're drifting off into other things. Let's get down to number 7. Niall, you want to talk about tech being misused near airports.
Yeah, well, I'm my last few observations are more into geopolitics, but drone sightings at airports and other places in the latter half of 2025 became huge news. Liège Airport in Belgium was forced to close operations temporarily because of a drone sighting. 3 drones were spotted over Douel Nuclear Power Station, also in Belgium. The Ile-Longue submarine base in northwestern France noted a drone sighting there. And 4 drones were actually shot down in Poland after fighter jets were scrambled. And let's not forget, last but certainly not least, the visit of Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, where 2 drones, I think it was, were viewed or were identified in Irish airspace. And quite embarrassingly, nothing was done about it. And there has since been a lot of finger pointing between the Gardaí and the Defence Forces over who was responsible for maintaining security, because I believe the drones were sighted over water, and there was uncertainty either as to where they were launched from, whether they were launched from sea or air. As we're talking, the prevailing wisdom seems to be that they were launched from the sea by a Russian vessel with its transponder turned off. So a member of the Russian shadow fleet that we know is out there. And it has really been a national embarrassment that such a lapse in security happened, and that it turned out that the Defence Forces did not have the same capability to deal with drones, to jam their operation in the way that the Guards did have that capability. So tremendously embarrassing, has forced a U-turn on Ireland's defence spending. So I think we've got a commitment of 1.5 billion to be spent by 2030, a lot of it going to anti-drone technology. But some of it, from what I've read, it seems to be they're fighting last generation's war by looking to invest in very expensive military hardware, when we have seen in Ukraine that very inexpensive drones have proven to be highly effective against very expensive hardware, be it, planes or tanks or, submarines or warships. You do not need to invest billions and billions in order to have an effective military anymore. When you have consumer grade drones being repurposed as anti-personnel weapons, you don't need to spend millions and millions on armoured personnel carriers, especially seeing as we're an island nation. But we do have to grow up. And that was very much the message from this. I mean, Russia operates under this fascinating military doctrine called cognitive warfare, right? And the idea is effectively you twist the narrative to the extent that people actually believe what you want them to believe, right? We have seen in Ukraine that the Russian military has been significantly depleted, that it is not as well run as people had feared, that, a determined fight back from Ukraine has, stemmed the flow or stemmed the tide of Russian advances. I mean, at current rate of advance, it will take 4 years for the Russian army to actually reach Kyiv, for example. And that's, with resources being as they are at the moment. So that narrative that, the Red Army are millions strong and they have just so much more hardware that's so much more superior to anyone else. That's the line from the Kremlin. It's not what the data shows. If you've been keeping track of the Kyiv Independence daily tally of Russian losses, their tank fleet has been obliterated. Their APC fleet has been significantly damaged. Ukraine has de facto superiority in the air because, Russian jets costing millions and millions of euro can effectively be downed by suicide drones. It makes no commercial sense to operate an air force when it can be countered by low cost equipment. So, what we're getting out of the Kremlin now is the idea that, you have to accept our Russian written peace plan that is being pushed by America. Otherwise, hint, hint, we will advance into Europe. And Russia does not have the military capability to expand, possibly take all of Ukraine for one, let alone, expand its campaign into the rest of Europe or to NATO countries. So I think, the drone sightings are just one example of Russia flexing its muscles, showing that, look, this is how little we have to do to scare you people.
Yeah, and to cause complete chaos.
And to cause complete chaos.
And if they were to back that up with a cyber attack on airports and travel systems... Yeah.
This is actually a plot to speak to Jason's dislike of middlebrow sci-fi. But this was actually a plot in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, where on Earth, which of course is utopia, there's a power cut, right? And everybody goes nuts because nothing like this happens on Earth ever, right? And there's a scene where Captain Sisko sits down in a park. And Changeling, one of the Federation's mortal foes at the time, sits down beside him in the form of another member of his crew, and he's like, how did you get here? He's like, oh no, I'm a Changeling. I'm one of the bad guys, but we've had nothing to do with this. But do you know how many of us there actually are on Earth? And he was like, no. So the assumption being that, there's an organized, coordinated cell going about, and he's told, no, there's only 4 of us. There's only 4. And we're not even doing anything. But that's how much it takes to get you guys to be petrified of us and to put limits on your freedom. That's all it takes. Just the fear and the possibility. Nothing to do with actual abilities.
What interesting rabbit holes you take us down, Niall Kitson. Thank you very much. Our top 10, number 8, Jason, bring us back onto tech with the richest company on planet Earth.
Yeah, I kind of want to stay on that last topic, but anyway, let's move on. Yes, I mean, it's again fairly early in the year, but this when we really started hearing about Nvidia, but in October they had a $5 trillion market cap. Now, before anyone starts wondering what that exactly means, that is the cumulative value of all outstanding shares. So it doesn't tell you anything about their revenue or anything like that. It's just a kind of snapshot of what this company is worth according to the market at any given moment. What's really interesting here is this is the picks and shovels of the AI revolution or the AI boom. It's not Google, it's not Anthropic, it's not OpenAI. It's the guys making the boring hardware. And I know people think as far as hardware goes, Nvidia is a bit more exciting, but at the end of the day, they are still just designing, silicon. So I found that really interesting because behind all of the kind of weightless dreams that we still have of the internet economy, there's still machines chugging away, things are being built, stuff's being dug out of the ground, hit with hammers, programmed, electricity pumped into it, water pumped around it. I think that really needs to be understood. Interestingly, when I was sort of Googling a few facts around this. I still Google things. I discovered that Nvidia is now considered the 70th largest defense contractor by revenue. Now, as far as I know, it doesn't make any defense things. So that's just CPU purchases. Silicon semiconductor purchases, shall we say. I found that really interesting. And Jensen Huang, the boss, was made the FT's Person of the Year, which seems fair enough to me.
I think the phrase that comes to mind thinking about Nvidia is during a gold rush, sell shovels. Now, that's going back to the gold rush in the States of when, 1850?
Yeah, the California gold rush.
And here we are nearly 200 years later. Nothing. That's what I was saying about AI and kind of thinking back to the Industrial Revolution and stuff like that. Things change, but the fundamentals remain the same. So what you're saying about Nvidia and, during a gold rush sell shovels, it's essentially the same. Number 9, let's get on to Niall. And for 9 and 10, we're going to nominate our Person of the Year. Niall, 2025, you're going to give the year to whom?
I'm going to throw a curveball into this because part of our discussion earlier has been the shift in power from markets back to politics. And one example of this is the successful mayoral campaign in New York City of Zoran Mamdani. He is my Person of the Year, and he is why. He went from a campaign of single digits, right? At the start of his campaign, I think there was a field of 9 candidates. It was a very wide field. New York, as we know, it's the deepest of deep blue cities. I mean, it's pretty much which Democrat is going to end up running the place. So it was quite a crowded primary. And there were a few moments where people went, actually, this is the guy. This is the guy who's going to win. This is the guy that's going to represent us as mayor because he's closest to what we want. And he's going to actually, he's got a set campaign. He's got a set platform based on things like free childcare, free transport, free bus transport, government, state-run grocery stores and rent caps. These are very popular measures. And he stood on his platform and he said, this is what I'm going to do. However, what's interesting is that he ran his campaign through a very, very clever, I'm not going to call it sophisticated, because he was just making good use of the platforms that were available to him.
Yeah. Keep it simple, stupid.
Keep it simple. And everything that he did as part of his campaign, he turned into a moment. He managed to turn it into a viral moment. When Trump won re-election, he went out onto the streets with a voice recorder, very similar to the one I'm using right now. And he did a video of just asking people, why did you vote for Trump? Did you vote for Trump? Why did you vote for Trump? And this was fact-finding on his part, but it was also a viral video. So he put it together and, okay, had to listen. This is what's annoying people. This is what Democrats have been missing out on. This is going to be the direction of my campaign. And let's also frame this as Mamdani didn't come from nowhere. I mean, he was a very well-regarded assemblyman in New York. So he wasn't starting from zero. It's not a meme campaign by any stretch. At one point he went on hunger strike with taxi drivers as part of deregulation measures. Because I won't go into it, but anyway, he went on hunger strike in support of taxi drivers in New York. So he had a tremendous amount of goodwill already built up. But everything that he did in public. He turned it into a viral moment, and some of his videos are tremendously entertaining. Like, I've shared them around with friends of mine, and I said, look, he's going to win because he's genuine. He's charismatic, and he knows how to sell his message. And as it turned out, these are all the things that led to his victory. And this was in spite of a lack of official endorsement by the Democratic Party. I mean, he ran as a democratic socialist, but none of the main Democrats, that would be Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer in New York, actually endorsed him. Largely because of his position on Israel. There is one of the viral moments in which people went, yeah, he's our guy, was a campaign debate. And it was televised and all the candidates were up there. As I said, there was a lot of them. It was a very crowded field. One of the questions was, as mayor of New York, where will your first international visit be? And everybody said, Israel, 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 Israel. And he said, I'm staying in New York. I'm being elected to be mayor of New York. I'm staying in New York. I've got a job to do. And everybody that watched it just went, yeah, that guy. We need somebody that's actually going to serve New York. We have serious issues. We've got quality of life issues. We've got things that were, left to wither on the vine. We have significant problems. We need somebody that's going to stand up for the average consumer. We need somebody that is not beholden to the donor class. And that turned out to be another defining message of his campaign. I am running this campaign based on small dollar donations. I'm doing things that are innovative. It turned out he won the primary. When it came to a general election, he was up against the founder of the Guardian Angels. I don't know if you remember that movement in the 70s and 80s, which were all about keeping New York subways safe. Basically, self-appointed bouncers that walked around wearing red berets and T-shirts. I'm sure it was a solution for the time, I guess is the most charitable way of putting it. And there was Andrew Cuomo, a corporate Democrat with big money behind him who didn't even live in the city, but had tremendous name recognition. A former governor of New York as well, who did some
might I ask you a question on that, Niall?
Sure.
It's quite obvious who Cuomo would have been representing. That's the traditional Democratic Party, what Americans call liberalism. In Europe, liberalism having a different meaning. It's the kind of no interfering with corporate politics, maybe a little bit aiming toward freedom on social issues, but absolutely not helping people economically, right? That's the classic liberal. When we think of more traditional left-wing politicians, we tend to think of them having a basis in trade unions, but I don't think Zohrani has that. I mean, I don't even know if that exists anymore. I know there are still, powerful teachers unions in the States and so on, but like organized labor isn't the force it used to be. So what is in your opinion, the fundamental reason who is supporting him, and what is the basis for his saying, well, we want to have subsidized food prices?
Yeah, he's a populist. He's a disruptive candidate. He doesn't play to those traditional corporate interests, which people are just tired of. I mean, American politics is a money game. When Harris was running for president, people were like, she's raised $1 billion. She's shoo-in. Never mind the fact that Trump raised 250 from Miriam Adelson and 250 from Elon Musk. He was nearly matching her just on the basis of 2 donors, let alone, an entire country's worth of small dollar donors, But that shift away from that big money politics to actually here's a solution. And he does have good relations with trade unions. I mean, he did very well with taxi drivers. He is reaching out to the police. I know part of the platform that Liberals in America have been tarred with is defund the police. But he seems to have done a pretty good job in reaching out to the police unions, the police union in New York, and saying, look, that's not what I'm interested in. I want to make sure New York is a safe city. That's your job. It's going to be my job. So let's work together. He's very good at building consensus that way.
All right. So that's your person of the year, Mayor of New York City, or the mayor-to-be of New York City. Jason, your person of the year to round out our list of 10.
Yeah, mine's a lot more quotidian. And I want to stress that when I say person of the year, I'm referring in the sense that Time magazine uses it. It's not necessarily a positive judgment, just on their historic significance. So I'm sorry to raise this ghoul again, but I'm afraid it's Elon Musk. I will just quickly say I had Alex Karp, the paranoid founder of Palantir, as my runner-up, but I think Musk just about tips it because of his sort of jumping into the Trump administration as the Department of Government Efficiency, absolutely causing absolute destruction everywhere he went, and then leaving and falling out with Trump in a sort of absolutely chaotic exit. I just thought everything about it was an absolute tragedy. I thought it was kind of funny watching American liberals get very annoyed about US aid being gutted, considering that US aid has been the primary propaganda arm of the US state for decades. But anyway, we'll leave that aside. I don't think it's a good idea to take a tech bro and a bunch of computer programmers, one of whom's name I won't even repeat here, and put them in charge of the civil service. I find it absolutely bonkers. Of course, Musk himself clashed with Trump over the so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which he saw called a disgusting abomination. So Musk does seem to be a kind of true believer in the kind of libertarian side, except when it comes to his own company, because he wants those fat government checks himself. It really was alarming to watch the US, which has been the world's predominant, cultural and military and in every other way superpower for since the end of the Second World War, just absolutely wring itself, just fall to pieces. That's the state seemed to be destroying its own capacity to act. I find that shocking, and I don't think we've seen the full outworking of that yet. Mm.
Well, listen, that is your person of the year, wrapping up our top 10 list of the big stories of 2025. Now, we did a little study looking back at all of the episodes of Tech Radio from 2025 to see what the topics that were actually discussed week by week. Would you care to hear what they are?
Well, we seem to have a weekly Elon Musk story, so he's in there.
Yeah, I'm really sorry about that, but anyway.
No worries. Number five on stuff that we covered throughout the year, Irish stories, and in particular electricity demand, which came up in our conversation today, and data centres. At number 4, Irish space. Nobody picked up on it. We had a very big year in Irish space because AirSat 1 was launched. I mean, as part of one of the launches from the States, but it was a shoebox-sized experiment, and it did a whole load of things, but it was an Irish satellite in space. And then also an Irish company is making the cooling system for one of the moon missions to come in the coming years as well. So we talked about that. Number 3, guys, toys. The iPhone Air, all the various laptops, the Pixel 10, the new Samsung phones. I suppose they're not news stories, but we loved our toys anyway throughout the year. Number 2, not surprising, is geopolitics and trade wars and tech and the whole tariff effects that we had earlier on in the year with tech prices and stuff like that, and chips and the whole thing. And then the number one thing that we spoke of almost every episode in 2025 was, can you guess? It was artificial intelligence.
I'd like to give a quick shout out to the Irish space industry, though, because, there's not a lot of press coverage of it because it doesn't really address the public. It doesn't make that much that we ever see, but it's surprisingly large.
Yeah, it is. And there are hundreds of companies in Ireland working in the space tech industry. It's quite interesting. Right, let's look ahead to next year, 2026. What do you reckon is going to be the big thing, Jason?
You know, I'm going to put my neck on the line and just copy you from last year, but not for the sake of copying. I think what you said about agentic AI in this episode was absolutely correct. It wasn't the tech for this year, but it probably will be for the year coming.
Niall, what do you reckon is going to be the big story for 2026?
I am going to lob a grenade into this discussion. And I'm also going to rip off something that I watched yesterday on YouTube from Red Letter Media. And it is basically the implosion of YouTube. YouTube is going to implode in 2026.
Now, why?
For the following reasons. One, the prevalence of AI slop, because it will just be so easy to put together, okay, give me top 10 blah gadgets of 2025, have a female voice narrate over it, say the following, or, generate its own script, and then upload it. And the barrier for entry for creating content is going to be so low, to the point where people will be able to generate AI influencers. And this is, a sector we'll be talking about in the show in a couple of weeks' time. So you won't even need a human influencer to tell you why a product is fantastic. You can just develop an AI one and it'll do that job. Now, the quality of content is bad enough. I mean, will be bad enough, right? Too easy to make, too low quality. As soon as you click on something, you'll be able to tell from the voice within seconds that, this isn't authentic. This isn't something I the whole point of YouTube, I mean, its tagline is broadcast yourself. If it's not even people doing it, what's the point in watching it? But part two of this observation is that what is the other sort of issue social networks have at the moment? It's with bots posting. This will be a case of bots talking to bots in the comments section. Engagement will be automated. And if engagement is automated, nobody is actually going to be responding to advertising. Advertising will just be, it won't matter whether you have a click to purchase offer or, anything like that, because the traffic isn't human. The comments aren't human. So you can have all this material going up online and nobody will actually be watching it. And the market will just implode because the system is going to be gouged up with material that has no, viewer value and is no engagement value. And when we see that social networks value themselves, any platform values itself on engagement, when that engagement is just by bots, its value will crater. We're going to see it across social media, but in particular, we're going to see it in YouTube.
Do you think, I would like to think that would result in people starting to pay attention. My dream is that would happen and people would start going, no, I want to watch or read or whatever it is, quality things. But actually, I don't think that'll happen. I think the sea of slop will just be there and none of the good stuff will get made either.
I think it's interesting you say slop because that was, I can't remember who it was, Collins Dictionary or something. That was their word of the year, slop, because that's what we're talking about. Just all that AI generated stuff going on social platforms and YouTube. Really interesting point, Niall. I didn't see that one coming. I like the way you say, I'm going to throw a grenade in here because that kind of relates to my prediction for 2026. And I think one of two things is going to happen in 2026. And one of them is going to be a war somewhere or a market crash or both. And I think if there is a war, this is why I mentioned in the tech, it's not going to be on the streets. It's going to be, as you were talking earlier, Niall, it's going to be drones and it's going to be cyber warfare and attacking systems and electricity generating stations and all of that kind of lark.
I don't know. I think it'll be something much more traditional because America is laying the groundwork for regime change in Venezuela.
Yeah.
I think, if there's a significant military conflict, which is to say one that involves a superpower that isn't already ongoing, it will probably be that, and it will, to look at internal politics, it will largely be as a diversionary measure, because wars have a tremendous ability to unify populations. And when you have, I hate to bring it into this podcast, but when you have the Epstein files hanging over the Trump presidency like a bad smell, anything to distract from it would be seen as a net benefit for the administration. So I think we will see a war. I think that it will be regime change in Venezuela under the guise of, stopping the flow of fentanyl into the US. They're laying the groundwork for it already. The question is, will it happen in 26? I think so. If Hegseth is still held around as Secretary of War, it'll probably happen. If there's something else that happens internally, maybe not. But that's my prediction.
We wait and see. Well, listen, let's leave it for the podcast and also for this year. It's been a really interesting discussion, I have to say, guys. There's a lot of stuff in there that I didn't expect that you would have highlighted as stories of the year, or even the two people of the year really surprised me, and the predictions for 2026 have all completely surprised me. So Jason Walsh and Niall Kitson, thank you very much for joining us.
This is Tech Radio with Dusty Rhodes and Niall Kitson.
That's it for our show for this week and for this year. And a big thank you to you also for joining us throughout the year and listening and supporting us. I hope you'll be with us again after Christmas and New Year break, when Niall will be reporting live from the Stripe Young Scientists exhibition at the RDS in Dublin. And that episode coming out on the 8th of January. In the meantime, from myself, Dusty Rhodes, and Niall Kitson and Jason Walsh, thank you for listening. Take care. Have a great Christmas and a 2026.
Remember, you can get the latest Irish tech news with hourly updates, daily newsletters, and more at our website, techcentral.ie. Share the knowledge and invite a friend to listen. Search Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for Tech Radio Ireland, or listen with RTE Radio One Extra. Tech Radio is produced by dustpod.io for techcentral.ie. From me, Artemis, live long and prosper.